Our next talk is going to be in two parts. Our presenter is Jared Ficklin, and he's going to be giving a short 20-minute presentation that will then segue into a teleconference call, because it's the future, with Syd Mead, who is a famous designer who designed movies like Blade Runner and stuff. And this is Jared Ficklin. He's a futurist, creative technologist, and partner at Argo Design. He's been designing technology for over a decade, focusing on innovative or unique interaction models, especially involving interesting inputs like touch, multi-touch, voice, or gesture. He's the co-director of the Austin Public Skate Park Action Committee and an evangelist for the cable car-based mass transport vision. Please, everyone, welcome Jared Ficklin.
Thank you. This has been a really interesting day. I love Toronto, I love Canada, but I'm going to get a little metaphysical on you right out of the gate. I'm a big believer in the quantum subconsciousness. I think that as human beings, we are all connected, and I don't mean just by the internet, although it's helping massively. I mean like way down at the subatomic level, that if you, due to the 10 dimensions that are predicted by superstring theory and the ever closeness and entanglement of atoms, that when you have a moment of inspiration, you're actually sharing that moment of inspiration with 9 other people. They're having that same idea at the same time. So you better get it on YouTube or Kickstarter, or just create an image of it. Images do a great job of predicting the future. Or maybe they just show a future that we want. This is one of my favorite images by Syd Mead, and one of my favorite quotes about Syd Mead, that his work reminds you of something you have never seen before. At the time that he painted this, I'm not sure he knew that every children's museum or aquarium would look exactly like this. Not in the far future, but today with the curved LED screens and touch screens giving you information everywhere. So it's hard to know when you do this futurism thing whether you're predicting the future, maybe he just has his pulse so on technology he knew where it was going, or if you're actually creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe someone saw this in their youth and decided that's what the future would be like. And that's a cool thing about futurism. I don't know, we'll ask him later. So a little bit about me. I'm a product designer, and I once lived in 1867. That's when my mustache was the best it's ever been, in 1867. This qualifies me to speak about the future. Because for me, today is the future. I just think about tomorrow like I thought about today when I lived in 1867. At a product design firm, we always do future visions. Here's one of ours done by Chip Walters. He worked for us and is a good friend of Syd Mead's. I call it the car for millennials, because dual income, no children, maybe don't even want to own a car. At the very least, you're going to own one. But you're 2 people, so you got 1 car, and you work in 2 places. 1 car, 2 places. Very useful vehicle. This is what I call interactive light. Use computer vision, a whole bunch of projectors, just to solve that problem of talking to someone when you want to order a beer. Not a problem for everyone. But it's the Uberization of the bar, and if we had something like this, then we all wouldn't have to sit there and wait forever while everyone who is more attractive than us got served. I call this the harness. It's a different kind of wearable. It goes on you like kinesio tape. It charges inductively as you sleep. It's very calm technology. It has artificial muscles that may tell you to turn right or left, or that someone harnessed is nearby, or maybe just give you a hug. And we kind of need a hug because there's just a little bit of anxiety in the room. And I usually talk to designers. They always have anxiety. But I mean, I was watching today, and there was just kind of this anxiety, like a lot of people seem worried that like robot overlords are just going to take us over and treat us like pets. And I understand where this comes from, because these are kind of the guys creating the robots, right? I'm not going to say he's being mean, but he's being really human, right? I'm not worried at all myself because of bananas. And also I think humans just like us are very capable of just falling into a water fountain because they were checking their text messages. But still, I share a little of this anxiety too. I wake up every morning and I go out to my Alexa and I say, Alexa, tell the robots that I'm on their side. I figure if you do that 10,000 times, it just becomes part of the base code. when the uprising happens, there'll be this ring around my house of confused robots. Why can't we go in there? You could do this too, because remember, only you can prevent Skynet. But it's hard not to have this anxiety because you have people like Elon Musk out there saying with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. And even Stephen Hawking said AI is likely to either be the best or the worst thing to happen to humanity. So, guy's rarely wrong, and he won't be wrong this time. Love him, R.I.P. This is old. This has been done for a long time. This is Roberto, I cannot say his last name, it's Italian, Sagioli. Circa 1965, he published his book. He started these thoughts in the 1930s. He was born in 1888, and he was already talking about the traps of technology as it came to bear on humanity. So we've been doing this a long time. And what is the anxiety about? As we take this march towards the singularity, and the singularity is defined as this moment when machine intelligence becomes greater than human intelligence. So Watson, Hal, and then we're all like batteries in the Matrix. The Matrix is a sequel to Terminator, by the way. We can talk about that later. Really what I think it is that we're worried about, have we reached peak technology? And I define peak technology as the year where the majority of new technology released does nothing to advance humanity. So we've had a long record of technology consistently advancing humanity over time. But it may have been a function of the cost curve. It was really expensive, so it got employed in places where it could do the most good, right? And so yeah, sure. Autonomous cars are going to come into the office lobby and pick us up. They're going to become transportation depots, and we're going to summon them like they were apps in the computer and ride around and shop for homes and watch Game of Thrones on the way home from work. Which, by the way, if you're watching Game of Thrones on the way home from work, you want it to take exactly 45 minutes to get home from work. So cars will be a lot slower in the future, which means we won't get in accidents where we get hurt very often. But if we do, autonomous drones will fly out of the heavens, land, pick us up, and take us to the hospital. And the future seems really great when we look at all these kind of visions, and maybe we will aspire to do that. But then we look around us and we see things like this. We're like, this is that smart hairbrush. This is a walking skateboard. And this is a car for a pet fish. To begin asking yourself, are these really things that are advancing the human condition, except for this one? I'm actually really interested in this one. That's beside the point. It's just kind of like somewhere, we got to get used to the notion that somewhere on the Star Trek Enterprise there was a Sky Mall catalog. They never show it to us in the show, but I'm very interested in what is in that catalog. This is part of technology as well, right? It turns out that when we are given technology, we don't always put it to the most erudite purposes. Sometimes it gets employed just to make you stomp it out just a little harder. Right, I do a lot of work in this space, actually. I'm creating a lot of entries for this Sky Mall catalog. This is my version of a concert lighter. It uses a Bluetooth stack and a disassembled cigarette lighter to show you the waveform of whatever's playing in the room in fire. I think it's better than your standard concert lighter, like holding up your cell phone is what's standard right now, except for it will get you kicked out a lot quicker. And those are the waveforms of Sweet Child of Mine, in case you were wondering. These are the social lights. They turn on based on how many people are looking at them. I've always thought I could reverse the code, and at which point they would be the antisocial lights, and they would turn on if you weren't looking at them. That actually might be more useful. So it turns out a lot of these things aren't very useful. This is the Light is Ink books. I say someday light will be cheaper than ink. The day is today. It is a book. When you turn the page, you get the next page. Except it's not a book. It doesn't know ink. It uses light as ink. That projector on the stand, some sensors, and a tablet underneath are running the whole thing. Why? Because it's cheaper. It turns out, add up the cost of all those things, and it's cheaper than printing a large format book. We are so accustomed to technology being deployed because it's better or adds to the experience, we're going to have to start getting accustomed to the idea that it's being deployed only because it's cheaper. Speaking of that, I created these. These are the augmented reality porta potties. Best use of augmented reality ever, if I do say so myself. So, This is very useful information, right? I don't know if you noticed, there's a timer at the top, and we do know what you're doing in there. I like to say the line between information and too much information is a lot shorter than the line to these porta potties. Just a plug for myself, I'm bringing these to Burning Man. I've got an Indiegogo going, so you could be part of supporting this, because you do want this SkyMall catalog to exist, right? This is probably one of my favorite, and he's a Zen gardener. He's a two-wheeled robot who autonomously rakes a Zen garden. That's all he does. Which kind of begs the question, should he exist? Because kind of the whole point is to rake the garden yourself. That's kind of the entire point of a Zen garden. And now we reach a different line in technology, right? And this line is, I think, part of it's creating all this anxiety that we're feeling, right? For 100 years or more since the Industrial Revolution, technology has simply augmented humanity. But now we're entering an era now where we're seeing things that emulate humanity. And this worries us a little bit. It starts making us want to put human characteristics on it and moral judgments. This is a very popular thought experiment we were asked to design a solution to. The thought experiment is, okay, the grandma walks out, the autonomous driving car has the choice of either killing grandma or the passenger. Who does it choose? And when this was first given to me, I was like, this sounds all too familiar to me, except for it's usually like this. There's a wheat field, and we're harvesting the wheat. And this is a very dangerous activity. So why is this kid in the middle of the field? He's hit his head. Why is that rock in the middle of the field? Don't worry about that, or the grandma, or the car, or how that you had a car that could drive itself but couldn't tell that grandma was going to walk in the road. What happened in the old days, Superman comes in and just stops it all and saves it. You see, we really want to think of ourselves as being good. We want technology to be good. And so anytime something gets as capable as Superman, we want it to be morally good and to help us out, okay? And so our solution was what we called the hero drones. We ignored the car altogether, no ejection seat, no better code, and we just said, we're gonna have a system of drones that sit on the sidewalk, look at what you're doing, notice that you're on Instagram, and it's very highly likely that you're gonna step in front of this car. And that way, that car can just have its job of protecting its passenger, we'll have the job of protecting you. As soon as we know it's gonna happen, we deploy ballistically, expand as an airbag, and save you, just like Superman, right? Hope it works well every time. Here's the thing about Superman. He's not human. And that's the big problem with this. When we start thinking about technology as human, we create these really unfair constructs. In fact, we should really think of technology as not human, but in service of human. Because this is exactly the fear that we have. We're worried that this stuff will get so smart, become aware, and realize that it's a God and it can control our whole lives, and therefore destroy them. We're worried that it'll be evil because we think of them like humans and we think of humans as evil. Right? So let's not train them to be humans. That would be one simple idea. But all the time we're worrying about, there's actually other things that we should be worrying about. Right? That Zen gardener, right? It's hard to rake a Zen garden. So maybe I should just build a robot. It's hard to pick crops. Maybe we should just build a robot. People could die if they go to Mars. Let's send a robot. I suppose actually fighting to the death is something robots should do, so we'll just grant that one really quickly. But there's a certain kind of escapism that can come from AI and robotics that I really think we need to pay attention to. Also, there's kind of a deployment problem, right? Technology that augments human has a certain deployment pattern. Bruce Lee could punch in a few nails in a wall, but a hammer does a lot better job, so get hammers into as many hands as possible, right? But humans, we deploy in a very different way. We don't deploy them as factories or as solutions. We actually train them for 25 years, then we educate them, we put them in higher education, they go through an apprenticeship, and then after they work through a system of politics, we finally put them in control of things. But we train an AI to recognize all the problems with a electrical grid, and we're like, let's take this 2-year-old and put it in charge of our electrical grid. Perhaps we should think about raising technology that emulates humans in a more human form before we deploy it. So the singularity is this place where we worry if technology is good. But the other singularity could be a different place. It's a place where we make technology human. All right, I got a couple examples of that real quickly. The Zen gardener is going to go to Burning Man, not this year, but next year, but it's not going to go in its current form because I'm going to take it and I'll apply Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. Interesting thing happens when you apply those robot laws to the Zen gardener. The first thing it does is it stops raking the garden. Because due to the first law, it realizes that it has taken away the opportunity for someone to be mindful and present. That's doing them harm, so it can't rake the garden. However, if you were to put on an EEG meter and meditate, then you could achieve a certain signal on the robot raking the garden. If you issued the command in this way, then the robot could rake the garden again, because it would know there was a human meditating and it wasn't removing that and it wasn't causing harm. However, if you told the robot how to rake, the third law kicks in and the robot stops again. Because that would be removing the opportunity of the robot to be mindful. So what happens is that you will issue the command through meditation, the robot itself will actually pick the pattern, and that is an Asimov compliant robot. That's one thing we could do, is just kind of employ these things in the future. Put humanity into the technology. I think another thing that we could do is just go ahead and have autonomy create an abundance. Instead of having a robot picking the crops in the field, what if they were to handle logistics that could bring the fields into our garages so we could pick them ourselves? It's kind of a funny luxury that in North America, a lot of us live out in the suburbs. We slave away at a bank all day, and then we spend our weekends gardening. Meanwhile, we claim immigration is a big problem. Let's get robots to harvest our crops in the field. So this was inspired by the purchase of Whole Foods by Amazon. Whole Foods is an Austin company where I'm from, and so we were like, a lot of the news was like, this could be a terrible thing, and we're like, no, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe if the logistics of Amazon paired with the mission and culture of Whole Foods to bring high quality produce to the most people possible, it could create a whole new system. You'd be surprised how much produce is wasted. You can read all this, but I'll just put it this way. We grow 10 tomatoes, so 2 of them can end up in your fridge, and you're going to throw 1 of them away. Basically. This is why produce and perishable goods are way more expensive than manufactured food, which has a much larger shelf life and can survive the current system of logistics. So we grow it out in fields far away, sometimes in a different country, bring it in, gets to the market, eventually gets to your house. All right, well, so the first thing we said was, well, first of all, let's just take the refrigerator and push it through the wall, 2 doors. This way stuff can be delivered directly into the refrigerator. We'll eliminate one of the stops. We'll create a very local thing. We'll also make that the point of purchase. So there's a more aspirational buying where you buy like the broccoli but let it spoil in your fridge because you're not as healthy as you think you are. If your broccoli's sitting there in the fridge and your neighbor wants broccoli, well, a drone's just going to come and get it and move it to your neighbor's fridge so they can eat it. The second part of that is to get a complete data on the stream. One, Amazon should control the waste stream. They're creating the waste. But secondly, if you could just sit here and order stuff based on how you threw it away, we would know what you liked and what you didn't like, and we could better predict what you put in your freezer or fridge to remove more waste. We would know you're throwing those rotten apples away. Second, packaging. A little bit of miniaturized mass spectrometry, a little bit of a computer vision all hooked up to the cloud on a little piece of Tupperware. So you could put anything in this thing, hit a button, and it'll tell you the nutritional value and whether it's spoiled or not. This could create, by the way, this is not just packaging. At this point, this is an Etsy of food. Right now, your neighbor can't make a really good curry for the neighborhood and sell it to you because they don't have a commercial kitchen, and it's considered dangerous. It's considered dangerous because it is dangerous. You don't know whether there's pathogens in there. You don't know if they use peanuts and you're allergic to them. With something like that, the Etsyification, craft economy around food production could happen, and we can take the manufacturing factories and bring them in. And lastly, all this manufacturing space that we have in our garages, because we're all riding around in autonomous vehicles, could be made in the fields. Hydroponic systems in the garages where people harvest the food. And if there's extras, we go ahead and sell it to the folks in the cities. So at this point, if someone becomes not just a person in the field, but a person who visits your house once a week. We have this like romantic notion of the UPS guy or the postman, but we don't think the same thing about the gardeners who take care of our food. This would be an example of using technology to create an abundance. And once you have an abundance, jobs become work. I didn't know the difference between jobs and works until I went to Burning Man. No. Whatever you think about Burning Man, a lot of naked people in the desert doing drugs, it's an art festival, all that's true, but it's also a dress rehearsal for a post-scarcity society. And here's the pictures that you don't often see about Burning Man, and that's all the work, okay? These are all jobs I've done at Burning Man. Worked at center camp serving coffee. I've worked at Arctica handing out ice. I've delivered the mail as a postman. And I've fixed bikes. Right? The thing is, somewhere around Wednesday at Burning Man, you're really bored. You don't need a job, you need work. Work is good for the soul, actually, it turns out. And so that's why there is work there. Stuff there is actually done in a really inefficient manner in order to create the most work for the most amount of people rather than the least amount of work that creates the most productivity. If we have robots taking care of a lot of our infrastructure, we would have a chance at this kind of a post-capitalist future. If you want to get a version of it that isn't all naked people doing drugs in the desert, read Walk Away by Cory Doctorow. It's a great dissection of this kind of economy. I just want to leave us with a little bit of hope that robots could be a really great thing, but if we raise technology to be human, we'll have nothing to worry about. People are good. Thank you.